So maybe my view of performance is a bit old school, but I like to think in terms of performance not as something that is unidimensional, meaning just in terms of task performance. For example, how many policies did someone sell? I think performance is a little bit more complex than that. Hence, it might be useful to also think about performance as almost like a citizenship performance, where we think about pro-social behavior in terms of organizational citizenship, helping others, etc. I'll come back now where the personnel side comes in. And then counterproductive performance or counterproductive work behavior. So when we think about performance for personnel psychology, we always try and figure out how do we predict performance. And there's nothing wrong in terms of trying to predict the actual task performance. That's why we see in various meta-analyses that general intelligence is still the better predictor of performance. But then sometimes people ask and say, but why are you then measuring personality? Well, personality comes in with the other two aspects of performance, the citizenship performance and then the counterproductive work behavior. And hence, again, for personnel psychology to try and assist organizations to understand that performance is not just one thing, it's multiple things. And trying to let organizations understand that if you would like to make better decisions, then maybe over and above task performance, also focus on the citizenship component and the defiant behavior component as well. So I'm going to try and answer it in this way. So although it might be possible on the predictor side to have some general personality characteristics that can be used to predict performance, I would rather suggest and encourage organizations to be very specific when they think about their measures of performance. So for each organization, what they deem as important would differ from industry to industry, from organization to organization. Hence the criterion side, the performance bit, that I think one should be able to tailor-made for that particular organization, because otherwise you're just going to predict something general that might not be relevant to that context. On the predictor side, I'm not saying we should go for generic measures per se, but if you do a proper job analysis and you identify what do you mean by performance, then you can identify personality characteristics or general intelligence that might be related to that. So in sum, I would not be that comfortable with a generic measure of performance for all organizations. If you say, for example, just look at something like a share price or that, there are various other things that can influence share price as a measure of performance for an organization. So rather try and drill down to those things that are sort of like under the control of the individual employee, and then use that as a measure of performance for that particular context. I'm going to sort of like link it with sort of like newer trends or things that we should be aware of. So a lot has been written in terms of, well, the challenges that one face when you conduct performance appraisals, and that you don't always get accurate measures from performance appraisals. Some journal articles or popular press articles even have gone so far as to say, well, we need to abolish performance appraisals. So if the performance appraisal is just there to figure out whether or not someone is doing their job or performing well, there might be some other ways of trying to see if someone is performing well. So to rather look for objective indicators of performance. I think later when we talk about big data, one can then say, but your performance is monitored almost like on a daily basis. If you start using big data and tracking whatever you're doing on your computer, on your cell phone, whatever that case might be, even with a smart device like my smartwatch, trying to figure out where am I, what am I doing, etc. Some of that data can then perhaps be used as possible indicators of performance, and then to use the performance appraisal to deal with some other aspects that might be context specific, to provide a little bit more nuanced explanations. But yeah, it's true that without proper training of those that will have to do the performance appraisals, we will still end up with the same problems in terms of not having accurate measures or good enough measures of performance. And even if we then have got good psychometrics, when we try and correlate them with poor performance measures, then it's not going to fly. I think that's where we will eventually have to make some hard decisions to then say, okay, although we may have access to all this information, it's still something that needs to be shared, and the employees need to be aware what are they sharing with the organization, and not just to sign away their rights to privacy in terms of all the information. So I think with the POPI Act, I think we will have to be guided by some of those guidelines that will be coming into effect when organizations start collecting data on employees, other than just the usual HR related data, and putting that into their algorithms and see whether or not it predicts performance. But let me put it to you like this. My view is that although we may have in future have got access or will have access to lots of data that might look performance related, we still need to bring in the science of personnel psychology. So you may find a correlation between some of the data that you're collecting and performance, but are you able to provide some theoretically sound explanations why that is a predictor of performance? So the algorithm may suggest that, okay, because my heart rate is so and so, and I'm here every morning at 8 o'clock, that's a good predictor of my performance. It still needs to be explained why would that be a good predictor, and not just say, oh, there's a correlation or there's a strong correlation and explain so much of performance, let's use it the next time. I would argue that just looking at the numbers without understanding why there is such a predictive hypothesis between a performance indicator and actual performance, without an explanation, it's just a number.